Hello, welcome to today's webinar about the Greenberry's investor opportunity. Sitting here with Sean Simons, who is going to be able to give information on all the questions prospective investors may have around this raise. Sean, excited to be here with you today.
Great, thanks. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely.
Good.
And just to kick things off, could we go through a bit of your background and how you came into the organization of Greenberry's?
Sure, absolutely. Obviously it goes back 30 years ago, but my wife and I at the time had been doing other things. My wife was in the healthcare industry. I was in a different kind of quick service restaurant concept that I was working with. And we had just recently moved to Virginia and really we're looking for a fresh start, a new idea. And I'm very fortunate, as we've talked about in the past, and we may touch on today, didn't even realize it, but I had some really amazing contacts in the coffee industry, both Alfred Pete, which is talked about quite a bit, the founder of Pete's Coffee and Tea, and also Jamie Anderson, who is also the founder of a coffee company, Anderson's Coffee, down in Austin, Texas. And it was really in just a family discussion around the dinner table one night with my father that we decided, because we were looking for something new to do. And, this was back in 1992, and the coffee scene then was really in its infancy. I mean, people other than maybe some on the West Coast weren't aware of what was coming. And so we thought we'd get in ahead of it. And the idea, we knew what Starbucks was. Alfred had kind of told us that story and where they were going. He thought there was great prospects in the industry. So, we were young, bold, excited, and jumped into it as our concept. And what was exciting was we'd always done things with other companies, but this was really our entrepreneurial spirit launching. And it was our, the first big thing we'd ever done on our own. And the first years are full of lots of fun stories, which I'll tell in the future, but but that's where it got started. We were young, ready to do our own thing in 1992, and away we went.
Amazing. And you see the expansion, and to get a sense of that success story, I know it all starts from the mission and from a business plan to location one and continued expansion. What was the mission of Greenberry Coffee Company at the beginning? How has that evolved today? And why should someone consider investing around that direction?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. Even over a 30-year span, the mission hasn't changed, but the marketplace, the timing, and the opportunity has come around. And that's what I like to say. Sam Walton said he was the best overnight success story ever that took 45 years in the making. And we didn't quite go 45 years, but the mission when we started was to create this coffee cafe concept that was really at the center of its community, a public place where people could come gather and do the things we do in coffee shops, whether it's, coffee and a bake with your friend, a business meeting with your associates, and all kinds of business meetings. I've seen people rolling out big plans in our stores and stuff. They in a way, they treat it as their office, a remote office, I guess. But the idea was to be center of the community, very connected with the community. Our idea has always been, with the people we hire and with the activities and our marketing and advertising that we do, we want to really become that important place in the community. Schultz at Starbucks called it third place, which we can talk about in a minute. I think they've left that third place. But that's really what we always wanted it to be. And we felt like that builds this connection with a customer base, and that builds that foundation for the business itself. And it's always done that. We've had a tremendous loyalty in our concept. We see our same customers every day, which very few people in the food industry see their customers every single day. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity. But what took a while for opportunity for us was Starbucks, because for about 15 to 18 years of our existence, they were completely dominant in the industry. And when I say dominant, it was dominant from a real estate perspective. They grabbed all the locations, just their sheer momentum because of the organization they built. So we really couldn't expand rapidly in our early years. And it's really now where I see those opportunities presenting themselves, because we're in what I call a post-Starbucks world in a way. They're out there, they're very successful, but they don't have that excitement or that, almost cult following they had in their early days. And as I alluded to, I think they've lost in the way they present themselves, that connection to community, third place, as they called it. I think they've lost that. To me, they're just more of a fast food place along the highways that has a drive-through now. And that's where I really think our opportunity lies, is to continue to expand and be that community connected coffee place in every community we go into. And I see it happening today, whether it's in our stores in Japan, the US, Saudi, any of the other markets that we're in or we're about to go into. It's making that connection that really separates us from the pack.
Absolutely. And I recall Starbucks having that in the early days, and
Yeah.
have seen it go to more of the third place spot, as you've mentioned. And I love hearing about the inspiration to create the business. I love then seeing the timeline and how you guys went from 1992 to the expansion in 99, getting into Whole Foods, the global brand, cold brew. What have been the inspirations along the way beyond just that inception point? What has been the driving force to the rapid growth that you guys have had?
Yeah. Well, there's lots of innovation along the way. And I'm always proud to say, I think many of the best ideas come directly from our stores, what we're experiencing in the stores. The Nitro Cold Brew, one of the most recent examples of a product that has just taken off and done very well for us. It's a funny, quick story, because cold brew itself was around in the 1970s, and it never really took hold. It wasn't very popular back then, but the idea of how to make it and the benefits of it really were there in the 1970s. But it wasn't until about, I'd say, 2005 to 2007 range where you started to see it trickle into the marketplace. And then the idea of infusing it with nitrogen and putting it on tap was a curve that came a little bit later, and that's really what popped it and took it off. And we put it in our stores, and it was the single best new product launch in our history. Just people absolutely loved it because it's theater. It's great product, but it's theater. It's like walking into an Irish pub and you pull a draft of Guinness. We're doing the same thing with Nitro Cold Brew, and it's just it just adds to the ambiance of the store and what we're doing. So, it's just all along the way, there were those moments in time where a new product, a new idea, a new way to present the stores, they come along very organically. And I'm always proud. We're always very eyes wide open, keep the ears open, looking for those inspirations. The growth patterns come from me and the team deciding where to go and what to do. But I always think, as long as we don't lose our roots, lose our mission of what we are, the growth follows that, because the success is always built upon one store at a time, one customer relationship at a time.
Absolutely. And seeing some of those growth numbers, I think it was over 11,000% between 2019 and 2020. And with the nitro, with alcohol, a standout product, of course, it's very evident that you guys are intentional about where you're focusing those future developments.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a good point to talk about too throughout this conversation today is, we're a fairly complex company actually in our industry. There are a lot of people in the coffee business that just open cafes and whatnot, but the integration, the vertical integration of what we do, I think is key too, because every time we grow, it pushes growth throughout our organization. And that's what I've always wanted as a strategy. The ability to be able to grow in one segment and have that spill over to our other segments. And that's worked really well for us. Every time we open up a new store domestically or internationally, that feeds business to all of my other companies that support that business. When we grow the ready to drink beverage line, which was brand new, totally different marketplace for us to be in. And that really pushes the expansion of the brand name itself much faster than even the cafe growth can do. And again, they all help each other along the way. And I think when we talk about investors looking at a company like us, I think that's something unique. Is we're not just a cafe company. We're not just a coffee roaster, which is really the silos most coffee companies are going to fall into. We are also a franchising and licensing company. We're also a consumer products company. So we really, really spread the gamut. And again, having that domestic footprint, international footprint, there's a lot there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you guys have 3 cafes in Virginia and DC, 6 domestic and 25 international locations.
Those numbers are a little shy, actually. There are 17 in Japan. There are 15 in Saudi. So your numbers may be a little bit old. Domestically, the stores you're mentioning are just the company-owned stores. Those don't include some of the franchise or license units as well. Domestically, I think we have around 22 stores, if I'm not mistaken, right now.
Okay.
I see the franchise growth as tremendous because there's such a change going on in the world right now, and I'm sure from your industry you see it. You know, I think the way it's talked about is the Great Resignation, or just this huge shift in the labor markets. People are rethinking: do I want to work for this company I've worked for 20 years? You know, do I want to do something on my own? Is quality of life more important than, you know, what I'm making today? A lot of people are rethinking that. I mean, I'm talking to people every day that want to rethink that. And usually a big group of them, it is, I want to try something new on my own that I've never done before. And coffee is a very familiar place for people because, you know, most of us go to a coffee shop every day. And so the idea that you can own your own and do that as your career, and it really does, as I say to people, it gives that nice work-life balance, because you go to work, and as I like to say to my team, I've been doing this job for 30 years. I wake up and love it as much today as I did when I started. And that's hard for a lot of people to say. But we know our customers. We're doing something that they absolutely love. And I think that makes a big difference in your daily routine. It's a business for anyone that wants to get into it. It's not overly complex. It's very teachable. It's very easy to implement in a sense. The key in the early stages of it is just to make sure right location, right marketplace, that sense of community exists.
Absolutely. I actually have family in the coffee industry, and they pointed out to me every business drinks coffee. If you look at those office buildings out there, someone's drinking a cup of coffee inside each one of those.
Oh,
So the
absolutely.
addressable local market, it's really endless where these locations can emerge. And want to speak to that a little bit. And I was actually referencing the franchise locations as listed on the Start Engine page there.
Correct.
So
Correct.
apologize about the numbers being shy. On our last webinar, and my team here at DNA, I didn't do a full introduction of myself, Jason Fishman, but my team here at DNA, you guys talked a bit about the franchising opportunity. And for those who missed out, can you expand a little bit on some of the benefits to becoming a franchisee?
Oh, absolutely. And was really something that's been championed in the US, and then it spread around the world. But, you know, if you look at the basic statistics, and I'm just going to rattle these off as best I can remember, you look at the success rate of startups, and those startups that are not a franchise, just someone comes up with their own idea and goes and does it. And then you look at startups that are franchises. You join a company, you adopt their concept, their strategies, their business plans. And then you run 5 years out. The success rate, and I'm going to be close with these, so don't hold me to it, but the success rate for franchise-based businesses after 5 years is in the 90s. It's in the 90 percentile. The success rate for people that aren't part of a franchise, I think it's in the high 40s, low 50s. So almost half of them fail. So, you know, the obvious benefit with a franchise relationship of any kind, and certainly food, is you're dramatically improving your chances for success, that your initial investment will yield a return and provide you with a career and an opportunity that you're seeking. Why is that? Well, it's pretty straightforward. In a franchise relationship, you have an opportunity ahead of time to review the company that you are thinking about joining and working with. So they should have a history. They should have a track record. They should have stores that you can touch and feel and be a customer for, and get a good sense of what their success is, and is it what you want to do. a fun day for me with a prospect is always when I let them come play coffee shop. I tell them, I can talk about this all day long, but really you just need to come visit us in one of our stores. We'll put an apron on you, spend the day slinging coffee and have a good time. And if you, at the end of the day, are more convinced, then it's for you. So the really, the basic idea is you get to very carefully vet and choose with a franchise before you put your money down. Then the benefits of the franchise kick in, which is proven track record, a business plan, procedures, suppliers, all of the different components that you need, the crucial training programs up front, the marketing and advertising support programs when you launch, and then the ongoing support after that. And something that's often not talked about is the continued innovation. Every time we as a parent company come up with a new idea, we can vet it, test it in our stores. And then if it's a success, we push it out into the franchise community. So a franchise community gives you all those benefits, the innovation, and it really, I think that's why the numbers are the way they are, why so many of them succeed.
We've been marketing, we've started to market businesses for years. I actually use less favorable stats for the ones that are around 5 years later and point to the exact same things. You're working off a proven model. Those
Right.
systems are in place, they're delivering. And as you were speaking about before, the demand for coffee is not going down anytime soon. The need for more community, some of the standout points of your product is just continuing to attract audiences and consumer bases seek it out even further. I know you've broken into new markets. Greenberry's has expanded to Japan. Are you looking towards anywhere else in the future that you could speak to, of course?
No, absolutely. I think the most exciting new markets for us will be the UK and the European Union. We had a number of opportunities teed up right when COVID hit. And obviously that shut all that down for a time being, but those opportunities are resurfacing again, the same people that we've been talking to. So I see our next big push most likely will be in the European Union countries and the UK. That's why we established kind of a division of our company in Ireland, because it's going to allow us to better push those products into the EU market, some of the consumable products I mentioned, like the nitro cold brew. And it also gives me a basis for us to be able to support the development as it occurs in the EU.
Okay. And curious, what's the coffee industry like as you look at these international markets? What is it like domestically here? And what are some of the contrasts that you see globally?
Yeah, it's an interesting time in the coffee industry right now because like most commodities, we've seen tremendous inflation. So, the cost of coffee has been at a 30-year high for about 7 or 8 months right now. And it's been tough. It's a squeeze on margins for everybody. Historically, we've seen these highs before, but they are usually short-lived. Usually a spike in the coffee industry lasts anywhere from 1 to 3 months maximum. And this has been a sustained increase for a much longer period of time. But actually, as of this week, I've seen some of the biggest drops in the commodities market in coffee that I've also seen in a long time. So I think some of the things the Fed is doing to slow the economy down a little bit is gonna help in the commodities markets as well. So the coffee industry itself is kind of in a constant state of booming. We're always doing well. Some of the numbers you referenced earlier about growth have to do with some of the growth in cold coffee. I saw some statistics the other day. They actually think cold coffee consumption of all kinds will exceed hot coffee consumption. And that was astounding to me to read that. But in a way, we're seeing that. Our summertime sales of iced coffee in all its various forms in the cafes or through the national retailers we work with is really taking off. And I could definitely see that it could surpass that. So, coffee, we talk about recession right now. We talk about inflation. If you're thinking about investing in the coffee business, one thing I've always said is we're one of those industries that is about as recession proof as it can get. Certainly we have an effect, but people in the food industry tend to trade down. So you might not go to that expensive white tablecloth restaurant right now because you're pulling back on your spend a little bit as a family, but you're still going to go get that, cup of coffee and a muffin or a sandwich at the coffee shop. That's a much lower ticket. And sometimes in times past, I've been through a few recessions, we'll see a pickup because people trade down to us. And I am seeing some of that. So it's as I've said, we're kind of in this perpetual state of a booming industry. We do well. There's trends that come and go. There's competitors that come and go, and those pushes the needle around some. But it, in terms of a place to put your money, it's a very secure industry. I mean, as you've said, it's the second biggest commodity in the world. If you don't drink coffee, you drink tea. So we really, and it was amazing to me as we went into Japan or the Middle East, those cultures are so different from the US. And it doesn't matter though. The same things happen, the sense of community, the love of coffee. It's a universal thing really around the world that I've seen.
Absolutely. It's funny what you say about the cold versus hot. I noticed that in our office orders, in our in-office days. I'm an
Really?
espresso drinker myself,
Yep.
several servings a day, hot. So to see the cold drinks really dominate in terms of popularity in many of these cases, and then to talk about how it's being used and the recession proof. I've even seen professionals trade up their offices and meet at coffee spots
Oh yeah.
as needed, and have that social element, that community element, being able to wave to folks at the other table as a result.
Absolutely.
And what about the business model? We know all information's available on the Start Engine page, but anything that you can share firsthand or elaborate on, how does the business model look in this industry?
Um, Well, give me a little bit more sense of what you're driving at, because I am somewhat restricted in certain things I can say. But when you mean numbers, or what are you pushing for?
Yeah, just trying to paint the opportunity more for prospective investors. So
Sure,
again,
sure.
what you could share, of course,
Yeah,
but how the Greenberry's business is built, and anything that you'd like to highlight around it.
yeah. Well, I can give a little sense of, we are constrained by the laws governing franchising, given that we're a franchisor, and we don't offer what's called an item 19 in our disclosure documents. It's an earnings claim. So um, there are restrictions, but what I like to say is that the quick service restaurant model is what the coffee cafe fits into. So anything that is a come in, order your product, get it on the spot and leave, that's the quick service restaurant or QSR industry. That's what we fall into. Our models typically look very similar across different product lines. So whether you're selling a hamburger or a cup of coffee, a taco, whatever it is, we all have a very similar profit and loss statement and structure, the way we operate. The things that drive us that are very important are we are a high transaction volume business because our average sale is lower. We're not selling $100 steak dinner at a pop. We're selling a cup of coffee and something to go along with it. So the model is very dependent on volume. So when we're looking for locations, we need high volume, high foot traffic, high car traffic destinations to drive the business, which is very important. Then your two biggest drivers in the industry after sales are controlling your labor cost and your cost of goods or food cost. We have a lot of contracts in place that help mitigate and moderate the cost of the goods of the things we sell. Long-term coffee contracts, long-term food contracts, things like that. That's the things that a franchisor can bring stability and some protection from spikes to the franchisee community. Labor costs, we've all heard about what's going on in the labor world, and it is a tougher time right now, and there are labor shortages that we're seeing. The cost of labor has gone up quite a bit. No one likes to see a recession. A recession will moderate those forces to some degree. And I think because we had such a spike, it'll bring them back at least to some semblance of normalcy. But really the key is great location, high volume, control your costs, which is labor and food. Most all of your other items on the P&L are just very basic, static, standard items, insurance, things like that. utilities. So it's not a complicated business. There are a few indicators you have to watch very carefully. Again, that's all in the how-to and the procedures that we offer.
And what about the competition? You were talking about the number 3 spot. What does the competitive landscape look like?
Yeah, well, in terms of just sheer volume, obviously Starbucks is still the 800-pound gorilla in the room. They're in every marketplace. They have a nice, strong, established base wherever they are. But they're transitioning very much, and it'll be interesting to see what Schultz does now that he's back at the helm. But they're transitioning away from those community locations to drive-through locations, and they're pushing those drive-through locations to the busy intersections and the major interstates. It's really changing how they implement their business. And where I'm seeing that more than anywhere else is in the urban centers. Washington, D.C., home market for us. They're shutting down a lot of stores in D.C. because obviously they can't build drive-throughs in the urban ring. So they're moving out to the suburbs and they're opening these drive-throughs. That leaves a tremendous opportunity. I've mentioned that the urban environment is got lots of opportunity for us because the competition, whether it's Starbucks or Pete's or Caribou or some of the others, they're generally, each one for different reasons, pulling out. But the highest concentration of coffee consumers in the world are in the urban centers. So whether you're downtown Los Angeles, downtown DC, that's where the highest volume coffee shops typically will reside. And the major competitors are pulling out of those markets. And again, Starbucks specifically for drive-through locations, Pete's, Caribou, because they're having shifting, I think, priorities as they have had ownership changes. I don't know what their goals are, but I see that they're pulling out of markets and reevaluating things. So in terms of the competitive landscape, you still have Starbucks out there. Pete's and Caribou are there, but in a diminished capacity. They were each bought out by a large concern overseas. You do have a growing number of independent and smaller chains of coffee shops that are coming along, and I think some of them do a nice job. They're very organic. They come out of the communities. I think where we kind of thread the needle there is we've got the size and the history that gives us more growth potential, yet we've also not lost our roots, which is what the smaller shops in those communities are doing, which is stay in contact with the community, have that more friendly atmosphere, less corporate. And so I think we thread that needle really nicely, and that's where so much of our growth is going to come from.
Definitely. And that opportunity is definitely present. Internally, we were talking about closed Starbucks locations here in Los Angeles.
Really? You're seeing it there?
Oh, yeah. I don't want to quote the wrong number, but a list
Right.
of them here on the West Side, downtown Hollywood. So that is definitely a present topic. Anything further you could speak to about the current roadmap for Greenberry's coffee expansion and overall market opportunity?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, if I think about a potential investor or just to give a sense of where I'm guiding the company, the biggest opportunities that we see in front of us right now as a company are again, multiple because of the different silos of business that we operate. As we mentioned, because I'm seeing so much shift in the labor market these days and people's careers changing and that kind of thing, we're actually seeing a big uptick in the people contacting us about franchise opportunities, whether it's individuals, multi-unit owners, international owners. I don't like to use the cliche, the phone's ringing off the hook, but we've seen a dramatic increase in people reaching out to us for various market opportunities. And so I see that as a big growth area for us in the franchising world. And again, it happened in the 1980s, and it's happening again, where you have a major shift in the labor market and people thinking about their careers and that kind of thing. So I see a huge opportunity there for us to take advantage of in terms of our franchise growth domestically and internationally.
Sure.
Secondarily, as you mentioned, a very different business model for us, but the consumables, the ready to drink beverage industry is growing quite a bit in all sectors. I mean, we've seen there's just been an explosion of concepts and ideas for beverages. But you mentioned earlier one of the statistics, the 11,000%. The growth projections for nitro cold brew from the industry are astronomical numbers. They're huge growth numbers, and they drive to that concept of more cold than hot coffee being served. So we will continue to push for our relationships with national retailers. We're actually in discussions with an international partner that would really push the product in a market I can't talk about yet, but we're seeking those partnerships, those relationships to really grow the ready to drink beverage line that we sell very quickly. And so from an investor standpoint, one thing I like to always mention is when you look at scalability, the scalability of the ready to drink beverages is dramatically faster than the scalability of the cafes. Cafes take time to implement. There's construction, there's real estate locations and things like that. But the nitro cold brew, for example, that can scale very rapidly. And we've talked in a number of webinars before about the new facilities that we're building that will give us the capacity to meet that demand. Those are in place now and just starting up. So international expansion will continue for us. We love to find relationships with master franchisees where we are basically selling the rights to develop Greenberries at a country level. So it's a much larger relationship. And then just the organic growth. I mean, we always have organic growth in our online sales for coffee, our coffee that's pushed through many of the retailers like Whole Foods that we work with. So we have multiple paths of growth. Each one has its own trajectory, and we're well suited to really take advantage of all of those.
Absolutely. And with all of these great things occurring, how did you choose to do an equity crowdfunding campaign? What is the idea behind that route and involving retail investors, potentially user owners of the product to become involved in this round?
Yeah, well, it was when I first heard, I knew about crowdfunding, but I really hadn't been familiar with equity crowdfunding. And when I really found out more about that, I realized what a great fit it was for us, because over all of our growth in all of our years in business, we really had avoided the idea of seeking a small number of high net worth individuals or companies that can invest a lot of money in us. It was mostly a control issue. We didn't want to give up control. We didn't want to have a very small number of people having undue influence in the way we're running the company and what we're doing. I'm not saying those are bad things. Most companies go that route, but for us, in terms of our approach, that was not attractive. And the idea of equity crowdfunding really fit our entrepreneurial spirit, because to me, you're letting your existing customers invest in the company. You know, you have non-accredited investors as well as accredited investors that can join. The ability to sell shares that are much less expensive in terms of, the per share. You don't have to make a big investment to be a part of the future of the company. And then because you have such a diverse group of investors, yes, they all have a say and influence in what we do, and I always want to hear from them, but there's no single investor that has undue influence. And that was important to me. I have a vision for this company, and I want to run it in the way that we think is best. And so it just was a great fit for us as a company.
Excellent. We preach that same message. This is an exact adoption of why Reg CF and these type of investment vehicles were created. So always like promoting that and getting it out there. It's a real opportunity and democratizes the access to these type of investment opportunities at that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't want to polish things up too much, and we've talked about all the great things of Greenberry. I always like hearing how leadership overcomes obstacles. Can you share at one point an obstacle that was hit in Greenberry's timeline and what you guys did to overcome it? That's how we've seen some of the strongest companies get to where they're at today. And finally, learn a lot about a brand's personality, where the company's going from there. Are there any challenges that you may be able to share with the audience?
Oh, sure. I mean, COVID's the obvious one, but before that, the first big challenge for us was, my wife and I were young. We just started this company. We wanted to turn it into this, massive success story. And as I previously mentioned, this company called Starbucks came along, and we're very powerful. And we had to make some important decisions then from a leadership standpoint. And looking back, we made absolutely the right decision, which was what we had established was strong, solid, and we were very pleased with it. But it was not the right time to grow aggressively, because if we did, it was going to be a house of cards. And so it was very tough to be young, entrepreneurial, thinking about all the wonderful things in the future and say to yourself, we've got to put our head down a little bit. But that's what we did. And I watched a lot of my peer companies at the time go the other direction. In fact, some of those owners chastised us for not being aggressive enough. They're all gone because they tried to build something on, especially when it came to like real estate and whatnot. They couldn't get good, solid real estate because Starbucks was grabbing that. So it was hard to go against the gut of what you wanted to do, and being young and full of enthusiasm and excitement. But it was absolutely the right decision at the time. The other more recent one was just certainly COVID. I mean, I remember, by the end of March, I had furloughed 90% of my people. And I sat in the room with 12 of us at the time that were still the core that we were going to try to maintain. And I remember having that discussion because they're all mostly younger than I am, obviously. But I said to them, at that point in time, we didn't know what the future looked like. What is this disease going to do? How deadly is it going to be? How difficult is it going to be? Are we all going to experience tragedy in our lives? Thankfully, obviously, it didn't turn out to be quite as bad. There's been a lot of people that have suffered through this thing, I know, but for us in our communities, we've fared it well. But it was a challenge. I mean, you go from, we had the best first quarter 2020 that we had ever had in our company's history, and to go from that to zero was the biggest single challenge we've ever dealt with. But we did kind of, in a way, what I guess we did in our early days was we just ratcheted everything down as small as we could. It was turning everything off until the time was right to turn it all back on. And we spent most of our time trying to help our key people, just keep them attached to the company, keep them in good shape. And so that because we knew those companies that survive it and come out the other side, we're going to have a clearer roadmap. There will be fewer competitors, and there's going to be a booming opportunity coming out. Now we've come out of it and we're running into a recession. So, the boom is we've got another challenge in front of us. But again, we're a strong company. We'll be able to get through this without any trouble. And I really do think, they say the average recession is 2 years. We'll see what this one looks like. It's confusing. We're having employment increases, yet we're having negative growth. But I think however long this one lasts, I think we're going to have tremendous opportunities during it. And I think we're going to see those opportunities after it.
It really speaks loudly, Sean. And, with the community emphasis that you guys have, what you were able to do to get through those periods of time, many of the spots in Marina Del Rey here closed and we're not able to reopen. So I definitely think that is a standout, and glad we were able to speak to that a bit. And as we begin to wrap up and open up for questions a bit, I wanted to really emphasize, what are the top reasons to invest in Greenberries? Is it the consumables, the international presence, and the franchising growth? The market as its own, as you said, second largest commodity, coffee industry is not going anywhere, success, recession proof. Is it speaking to your retail partnerships and the foothold that you guys have there, or overall brand essence and that community feeling that each of your locations holds? What are the top reasons that should come to mind as investors are considering this opportunity?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you did a great job of reiterating what we've talked about today, and that is, I think when I think about my own investment world, I think investing in a company that has that depth and breadth of what it does, because in any given boom or bust cycle, or any challenge that a company faces in its industry, what I've always been very proud of is with the various sectors that we have, that we touch and that we do business in, if one is down for whatever reason, if franchising slows down, just to pick an example, those other sides of our business most likely will remain strong or have growth in them. And that's what I've observed over the last 30 years is we take hits from time to time in any given single part of our business, but we've never seen a hit that hits all of us. And I think, again, that goes to diversity. If we were a company that only operated cafes and you have a COVID or a significant downturn, you're in trouble. That's a big event that really hurts you. But because our breadth of what we do, it's really an insulating factor. It helps us. It gives us all those growth opportunities, but it also, I think, brings security to your investment because, we've been around for 30 years. Something's not going to happen tomorrow that's going to be negative. It's just more of the positive that we've had over all this time. So I think for an investor, the key is the quality of the company, quality of the products, because we are a product-based company. So you have to have an outstanding product. You need a solid, steady company that's got good management, knows what it's doing, has good plans for the future, which I've described. We've got multiple growth paths that we will be pursuing. So I think from an investment standpoint, I think that's what you want, is you want safety and security in your investment, and you also want to see the growth. And I think as a company, we offer those platforms and foundations.
It's been very clear in these discussions, and starting to see some questions come in now.
Okay.
One that I've heard team members bring up as well. Heard you're able to work with the founder of Pete's Coffee. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and the most valuable thing you learned?
Yeah, I was, this was back in the very beginning. I was introduced to Alfred Pete through Mr. Jamie Anderson, the guy down in Austin, Texas. Jamie had interned under Alfred even before, back in the 1970s. So this was an extension of that. I consider Alfred Pete to be ground zero for the gourmet coffee in America. He was ahead of his time. He was passionate about the product. As many people have read, Starbucks was born out of his company. And he was also, in a way, he was the quintessential small shopkeeper. He loved what he did. The quality mattered more than anything else. He had 3 or 4 stores in the Bay Area, and he didn't want to grow outside of the area. So some of his employees left and went to Seattle and started Starbucks. So it was an honor to be able to work with him. He taught us how to roast coffee. Our coffee roasting is an extension of Pete's in a sense. We have that West Coast dark roast mentality in terms of what we do, how we do it. Alfred gave us very tactical things. He gave me suppliers. He gave me coffee farms to work with. He gave me those relationships that he had cultivated over all the years, and those are critical. But how to roast coffee, how to sell good coffee was always what Alfred Pete was about. And that was the foundation we needed. Today there are lots of people that will go buy a small coffee roaster and figure it out and get into the business. You can go that route, but I learned from a professional who was, I think, the best in the industry. And I've tried to really continue his legacy as much as I can, as did Jamie Anderson. So, it was important. It's a credential I'm extremely proud of. Most people can't say they worked with him the way we did. Sadly, I met him later in his life, so he wasn't around long enough. But it was I'm very proud of what we learned from him.
It's amazing to hear, and would love to see more professionals in other industries do that. It's great to hear about that ecosystem in coffee, and to be able to provide introductions and really get you guys set up in the right path. It's powerful.
Yeah. And it was fun. I mean, Alfred was a very eccentric fellow. I always tell a story I'll never forget. Alfred drove a convertible BMW up and down the streets of San Francisco, and he took Roxanne, my wife, and myself for a ride one day. And he was also, his whole life, he was a bachelor, and just such a wild and interesting fellow, but scared us to death driving through the hills of San Francisco. He drove like a madman. So, but it was great fun.
Very nice. And what about the cold brew with alcohol, salted caramel, bourbon whiskey, strong alcohol percentage, and distribute across these different markets globally? Where did that idea come from? How come more groups in the space are not doing it? It seems like such a big area for expansion, and I see a couple questions around that.
Yeah, it is. The idea of putting alcohol in coffee actually originated with it was funny. We have a lot of breweries in Charlottesville, and as many people do in their communities. And I have some good friends in the brewery industry. And I had oftentimes said to myself, I really missed a business opportunity not to open a brewery as well as coffee, because in a way there's some parallels there. Um, and so we were just sitting around the table one day and said, well, why can't we come up with an alcoholic beverage that really has coffee as its foundation? And that was kind of the light bulb that went off. It took us about 6 months to work through the development of it. And really the biggest challenge is working through the legalities of the industry. It is such a regulated industry. It's very difficult because we had a brand new product, and I'm proud to say we were the first application at the federal level with TTB to apply for a alcoholic coffee beverage. So it was an idea that we kind of brought to market first. But because it was new and something different, there were a lot of challenges. The Three Locos type products that were out there had created a negative atmosphere for a caffeinated beverage and alcohol originally. So some of the laws and things we were up against were from that product, that era. And we actually designed a product that had less caffeine in it, not more or normal. Our nitro cold brew with alcohol only has 10% of the normal amount of caffeine in a cup of coffee, because through our focus group testing, we knew that people wanted a little bit of caffeine in it, but not a lot. And so we found that perfect balance for that. There still were some challenges in the initial launch because we tried to launch it right when COVID hit. We were not able to do the things you normally do to launch a beverage line. We couldn't go out and do tastings. We couldn't do major events and create sponsorship opportunities and stuff. COVID locked all that down. So we had some good success getting the product out there with some of the buyers for some of these retailers, but it was a little bit of a challenge. And then there was still some question and challenge about the caffeine content, because TTB and all their wisdom won't let us put caffeine content on the label. So there was a messaging challenge there. So actually what we're doing is the product is still out there. It has a really strong, smaller following at the moment through our channels. But what we're doing is, and I can mention this now, we're reformulating the production of the product in a way that allows us to get out of the current alcohol segment we're in and into a different segment, something closer to the seltzer world. And the benefit of that is much faster distribution and much more freedom in our labeling. And so that allows us to really overcome some of those initial trials and difficulties that we had. And as COVID has waned, we can also now get out there in the way we need to. So we're really looking forward to, in a sense, a relaunch of that product line with these new advantages that we have now.
Excellent. Thanks for going into more detail there. And your campaigns on Start Engine, the amount of investors who've gotten involved, over 102 on this round, hundreds on the last round, definitely shows the investor traction and reflects the interest among Start Engine's audience, other audiences that are going there. As we're wrapping up today's webinar, are there any final notes, any final thoughts that you want to leave with audiences?
Well, I think the things we've talked about, Roxanne and I are very proud of the company we've built. We're very proud of where we are in our careers and where Greenberry's is. The idea of bringing outside investors in was something we were somewhat leery of in the past, but with Start Engine, it really has opened up that opportunity. And I'm very excited about what Start Engine's doing for us and the investors that we've already brought in. So many of the early investors in our first round were from our customer base, and that was just such an exciting thing. And there's a lot of general excitement in our customer base to be able to invest in the future of the company. They've been customers all those years, but to actually be able to invest was such an exciting thing for them and for us. So, we're truly just very thankful for what everyone's done to help us in our growth path so far. And as I've said, even these webinars and things we're doing to support Start Engine is really helping with the franchise interest levels. I think that's going to continue to boom as more people learn about us and about what we do. I think there's I guess as Sam Walton said, our best opportunity is burgeoning right now after 30 years of incubating and getting things to where it needs to be. So we're just really excited. It's a great time for us. Our team's super excited, and I think the future looks tremendous.
Well said. Excellent way to wrap up. And for any audiences that have not checked out the Start Engine page, make sure to look at the perks. One of the tiers has a roast and brew all day with the owners. And there's 2 days in Charlottesville there. Definitely look for more information on that offering page. And Sean, it's been a privilege to be able to sit here and ask questions with you today. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
It's been very exciting.
All right. Look forward to the next one. Take care.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.